So tonight's talk is on the Aparihani Sutta. Some of you may have gotten a link in the email that said the Aparihani Sutta. That was a misprint. The correct spelling is Aparihani. And this is another sutta on restraint, which is a common underlying theme throughout the Buddha's teaching. In fact, I think you could honestly say that every teaching has an understanding of restraint at its core, and it's restraint at ultimately at our thoughts that are rooted in wrong view. Tuesday's talk this past Tuesday was on restraint. Saturday's talk will also be another talk on restraint on the Sundari Sutta, and I think next Tuesday's talk. And I wanted to mention too that I finally started putting some poems from the Therigatha and the Therigatha up on the website. Those are the Therigatha and the Therigatha are books in the Khuddaka Nikaya, which is the fifth book of the Pali Canon, and they are poems that are written or at least presented. I don't get into a scholarly debate about how they ended up as poems, from awakened monks and nuns. And they're just beautiful, usually very brief teachings. There's a section on the website that has now three of those poems. The talk I gave this past Wednesday was on the Mahakala Sutta, subtitled The Corpse, but it's just a great sutta in how quickly it gets to the point of the whole Dhamma. I just wanted to mention that. Let me read from the sutta. Again, the subtitle of this is Not Losing the Way, the Aparihani Sutta. The Buddha teaches those gathered, having developed four qualities, a Dhamma practitioner cannot lose the way and is free of clinging to views. When one has fully integrated the Eightfold Path, they are established in virtue, they guard the sixth sense base, they know moderation in eating, and they are devoted to mindfulness. And now these are very specific teachings. Even that last can be misunderstood. The Buddha taught a very specific application of mindfulness. It's not just to be mindful of everything that's occurring, although that's important, but that is the result of a well-focused Dhamma practice that has integrated the Eightfold Path. In other words, it's not Dhamma practice to think that I'm going to be mindful of when I'm washing the dishes. I always use that as an example, that being mindful of washing the dishes is Dhamma practice. Being mindful of washing the dishes is the result of the refined mindfulness that developed through the Eightfold Path. And that's very specific. The type of mindfulness that the Buddha taught is to be mindful of the Eightfold Path, to integrate it into our lives. Buddha continues. And how does one establish virtue? They are continually mindful of the precepts, and the various factors of the Eightfold Path. And of course, the middle three factors of the Eightfold Path, right speech, right action, and right livelihood, are there so that we recognize unvirtuous behavior and abandon it and focus on developing virtuous behaviors. And it's very specific and simple directions as to what right speech, right action, and right livelihood is. And I won't get into that today. I teach about that often, and there's plenty of information on the website about how to integrate the Eightfold Path. The Buddha continues, they understand even the slightest unskillful actions. It's such an important aspect of mindfulness. A self-referential ego personality, a mind that is rooted in wrong views, will continually create excuses for itself, for its own thoughts, words, and deeds, and justify unskillful thoughts, words, and deeds. And this is not to judge ourselves harshly or other people who might be engaged in unvirtuous acts. It's simply to recognize that what we're holding in mind, views rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths, are leading us to act in ways that are unvirtuous or unskillful. And the reason why that's important is that if we don't recognize it, we can't let it go. We can't abandon it. The Buddha continues, And how does one guard the sixth sense base? On seeing form, they do not grasp at fabrication that would further greed and distraction. So the sixth sense base is our five physical senses, and that sixth sense of consciousness, and I always give this qualification, it's not consciousness with a big C, meaning some grand cosmic consciousness that connects us all. That's not something that the Buddha taught, and I don't think that idea has any basis in reality. It's simply the consciousness that we're talking about here is ongoing thinking rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. So when we come in contact with the world, which is how we operate as human beings through our senses, and it is interpreted by our thinking, whatever we're coming in contact with, if that thinking is still rooted in ignorance, the resulting understanding and fabrication will itself be ignorant of reality. And that's what leads to all the distress and suffering in our lives and in the world. The Buddha continues there. They practice restraint at the eye. Furthermore, on hearing a sound, they practice restraint at the ear. On smelling an aroma, they practice restraint at the nose. On tasting a flavor, they practice restraint at the tongue. On feeling a tactile sensation, they practice restraint at the body. On cognizing an idea, they practice restraint at the intellect. They do not grasp at fabrications. And of course, in order to not grasp at fabrications, we have to understand what they are. Dependent origination states, and dependent origination is what the Buddha awakened to, and it clearly states that from ignorance as a requisite condition come fabrications. So when ignorance is gone, when there's no ignorance left in our own minds, there's no fabrications formed. What we're seeing is reality without any craving for it to be different, more or less, or different in any way. And we don't cling to the notion that what is occurring should be different, more or less, or occurring in some other way. And we don't frame what's occurring from a mind that is ignorant of the way things truly are. We simply are present with life as life unfolds. The Buddha described an awakened human being from the point of view of right view, as that view has a profound understanding of the nature of suffering. And that mind is a mind that is always resting in peace and equanimity, always calm. This is how one guards the doors to the sixth sense base. And how does one establish moderation in eating? They understand nourishment skillfully. They do not eat for entertainment or distraction. They do not eat for intoxication. They do not eat to grow large or for beautification. They eat simply for the survival of the body, so that the integrated life, integrated with the Eightfold Path, can be lived. The whole point of living here, isn't it? And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't take skillful pleasure in our lives, in a beautiful sunset, or even an argument if we understand it from the right view. But the point of having a human life, if there's any real point to it, is to awaken, to develop full human maturity. They abandon craving for food and mindless eating. Why? Some might find it curious as why would the Buddha pick that one thing out? Eating. Don't we engage or don't we indulge ourselves in all types of different behaviors, not just eating? But this is a fundamental aspect of our lives that we often take for granted, unless you are wanting for simple sustenance. Practicing restraint and moderation through eating is a very simple and direct way to start integrating the Dhamma. And again, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't enjoy our food, but we should take only what is necessary for nourishment. And that can even point us towards a healthier lifestyle. We don't need to eat a bag of potato chips watching TV. Both of that might be an act of lack of restraint. We might have one or two or three or a small handful of potato chips, but we'll be mindful. Again, I'm using a somewhat silly example, but we bring mindfulness into the most basic of human endeavors, such as eating. So important. And how does one establish, the Buddha continues, and how does one establish mindfulness as a quality? This is really getting to the right way to look at mindfulness. It is a quality that's developed And this is why I call it refined mindfulness, because it can always be developed further when it's resting in the concentration developed through Shamatha-Vipassana meditation and framed by the rest of the Eightfold Path. And how does one establish mindfulness as a quality? Whether resting, sitting, or moving about, they cleanse their mind of anything that is a distraction. Anything. So think about the ramifications of that. Most of what we as human beings hold in mind is something that we use to distract ourselves. The more that I develop the Buddhist teachings, and I think to a great part, I'm so fortunate to be in a position to teach it and listen to other people, their insights that they gain and some of the struggles that they have. One of the great realizations is how powerful and subtle the strategies are that we all use to continue to ignore our own ignorance. And so establishing ourselves in mindfulness is a way of overcoming that need for continued ignorance. In other words, a mind rooted in ignorance has to preserve its ignorance. And again, I'm not talking about simple life skills. I'm talking about, and the Buddha's talking about, developing the Dhamma. We have to be willing and have a framework, the Eightfold Path, that to recognize and abandon views rooted in ignorance. How else can we awaken? How else can we stop dependent origination, a mind rooted in ignorance, developing fabrications, and the rest of the process of dependent origination that results in a confused and deluded mind prone to constant disappointment? The Buddha continues, having established these four qualities, the Dhamma practitioner will not lose the Eightfold Path. The Buddha is teaching us so clearly and directly in this sutta how to stay focused, how to integrate the Eightfold Path in our lives. These four qualities, when fully adopted as part of our way of living in the world, will ensure that we live moment by moment within the framework of the Eightfold Path. The Buddha continues, established in virtue. And this is, if we do this, what the Buddha is going to teach right here, if we do this on a continual basis, and I'll say as best as we can, and what I'm saying that is nobody in the beginning stages, I don't know that for a fact, most people in the beginning stages of Dhamma practice won't be able to do this 100% of the time. So this is a reminder when you're outside of the framework of the Eightfold Path to simply come back within the framework of the Eightfold Path as far as your view of what's occurring. Established in virtue, restrained at the sixth sense base, established in moderate eating, and established in mindfulness, forthright and inspired. What a beautiful line. We gain the ability to be our own inspiration towards awakening by developing these qualities. The qualities for unbinding develop, delighting in refined mindfulness, knowing the danger of mindlessness. They stay true to the Eightfold Path and remain free of deluded views. That's tonight's talk. Thank you for joining me. I hope you found benefit from this talk, and if you do, please consider a donation at becoming-buddha.com. Thank you. Peace.